Hello, we're back. It's Surviving Classical Music. I'm Grace Newcomb. Andrew Byrne, as usual, is here behind the scenes so far. And oh, there he is. Give us a wave. And we have a fantastic guest today. Jane Achtman has joined us live for a chat. Jane is in early music, like Andrew and I are. She plays viola da gamba. She is fantastic in music management. She has many strings to her bow and even plays a bowed instrument. So I'm happy with that comparison. Jane, thanks for joining us today. How are you doing in the freezing cold?
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, but actually, I'm sitting quite comfortably in my kitchen with some tea on the side.
Nice. I went for the hot chocolate, as I told you already, in the biggest mug I could find. So Jane, we wanted to pick your brains about loads of things today. You've got a dual role in early music and in performance. You've seen the performance side of things. You have a very successful performance career. You run an ensemble as well, at least one ensemble. I know that you are sort of participating in the management of several ensembles. We can maybe talk about that. But you also, I think, are a qualified music manager. Is this something that you've actually studied and got a qualification in, or is this just something that you were very good at and started doing?
Well, basically, I started managing early on just because it needed to be done, so to speak, and you acquire some skills along the way. And then I was in cultural funding. I was actually employed by the Canton of Argo for 5 years to deal with applications for money. And somewhere along the line, I thought, well, actually, I would like to know a little bit about much more about what you should do, not only what I am doing. So I had a 2 year course in, yes, music management, and I officially have a diploma in music management. I'm also officially a music school manager, I guess you'd call it, Musikschulleiter in German. So, yes, I actually have the qualifications. Had to even write a master thesis, which I handed in January 2020.
Oh, very nice. Well, congratulations on that as well. So you've done the sort of official training for what a lot of us are just kind of trying to swim our way through a little bit. Is that something you'd recommend to those of us sort of trying to manage an ensemble just through not through instinct, but through just doing what comes up and what you see needs to be done? Did it give you a lot of better insights?
I wouldn't even say that it did that so much. I acquired a couple more tools than I would have had beforehand, but to me, management often seems like a question of aptness or ability. You can either manage or you can't, and yes, you can acquire some of the skills. In my case, it was more curiosity. Basically, the same thing. I mean, if you'd like to know more about notation, then you learn about notation. And I wanted to know more about management. I was actually very interested in the concepts behind it. There are really interesting concepts behind management about how institutions develop, why they develop, what happens in certain phases. Basically, a way of understanding the world I'm in.
And were there any surprises in that? Were there any modules that you thought, oh, I never thought about that before I did this course? I was doing that wrong all along.
Um, I would actually say not so much surprises, but the skills I found the most interesting for myself were people management. I wouldn't necessarily say that it's exactly my talent. And as opposed to sort of, yeah, in German you say s stepping into a bowl of fat, ins Fettnäpfchen treten. I actually acquired a couple of ways to deal with difficult situations that I can now just use.
I
Um,
have a question for you, Jane, relating exactly to this. Is that something which does formal training when it comes to people management? Is that something which you can benefit from equally to or more so from just kind of getting dirty and doing something and doing it with people and learning having more life experience, so to speak? or is there something formal which we can benefit from when it comes to people management, which we just simply couldn't get from real life experience?
Again, I think it's a question of talent. I think there are people who just generally deal well with people and maybe don't need concepts behind it. It depends on who you are. As far as I'm concerned, I sometimes will honestly say I'm happy for the help. And for me, it did actually help to use concepts. I think perhaps one of the most important concepts for me was a concept of, they call it the Harvard concept, of basically concentrating on communal interest and not the actual aim, in the sense of when you're dealing with a problem, to think about not so much, I want exactly this or the other, but to think about, what do each of us actually want? What is the real important thing we both want? And if you concentrate on the communal interest and not so much on a specific goal, you're much more open to compromises, different approaches, solutions. And it's actually helped me to make better deals in work, to deal more kindly with people. It's sort of stepping back one, because generally you find out, and this helps actually even in your personal life. It's personal life, it's ensembles, it's everywhere. If you just think about, why is the other person screaming at me, you might actually have a different answer. Not so much about he's screaming at me and telling me to, I don't know, do the dishes, but why is the person screaming at you? And that why is often very, very important. What is this about? They didn't sleep enough? Oh, should I give you some time for a nap? This applies to kids, obviously.
And adults, probably.
Yeah, but you can't send them off for a nap. Or you can, but
I think I'd quite like it if I was in a rehearsal and someone said, "Hey, Grace, just take a little nap there, have a cup of tea."
So, Jane, from your experience now, both talking in your professional and life experience and also in terms of formal training, my question to you would be, for those people who are listening, who are early in their career, who are still studying maybe, what one...
I think we often end up having great ideas but not doing them. And the biggest problem of getting to the doing is often, where do you start and how do you start? So the first thing is, obviously, maybe the most important skill is to have a really good idea or a really good concept. But after that, when you're talking about management, it seems to me the idea to visualize where you want to end up and then break it down into bite-sized amounts of work that you can actually do. I find a mind map helps. Just sort of, so I want to do 7 concerts in Switzerland next year. So what do I need? And then you draw yourself a mind map. I'm going to need money. I'm going to need rooms. I'm going to need people. I need the music. I need the rehearsal time. And once you've got this mind map, you start adding all the little details that it's going to need. And ultimately, then you end up with pretty clear things to do. And it ends up then only being one thing at a time. You never have to do the whole thing. It's just getting it down to a manageable level of things you can do moment by moment, day by day.
Mm-hmm.
That's advice that I need. So it's not overwhelming, but you can sort of visualize the tasks and then see them one at a time and say, what can I cope with this week, or today? Which one can I tick off?
Exactly.
Yeah, interesting. I think the one thing that I have a problem with in general is that I think I don't think about the greater goal. I do little things that I think are practical, but I don't really have an idea of where that's going to end. And so I get things done day to day, but then in the end I look at the greater picture and I'm like, I don't know, the bigger picture is just a big question mark, And so I find it hard actually for me to so when you look in hindsight to the things that you've done, especially in this year, I'm looking at a sort of organized chaos where nothing is really related, but there's all sorts of different things that I have accomplished, and I'm not particularly clear on what it's supposed to end up being. It ends up being everything that I've done this year in a pandemic, but it doesn't lead me on to some specific progress, a specific journey or something, which I remember having a conversation with Tony Rulli, and he had this story about where he is now. And, at the time he was, I don't know, 70. And he said, all of the things that I have done have led me to the career that I've had. And I'm like, well, that's also the benefit of hindsight. But at the same time, he weaves a really engaging narrative about how he's ended up here, of all places, this creating a sort of school of performance within the Schola, or at the time he had. And whereas I'm just like, and now I'm here, still alive, playing the bassoon sometimes.
And it looks like, Andrew, we're still in 2020, according to the text in the middle of our screen.
Oh,
no! There's a bit of
the pandemic is never ending.
A blast from the past.
Sorry, I'll fix that.
We have to relive the whole of the last year.
Oh, no. Yeah, there we go.
Oh, we've just gone into lockdown, I realized, last year at least. Oh, we're all sitting at home. Wow.
Let's not go back there.
Oh, yeah, you see, it just never ends. It's perpetually the same year over and over again.
Well, putting it as a person, I mean, I'm not quite sure what our age difference is here. I'm 46.
I'm 31.
Okay, no, that is actually enough of an age difference. At 31, I had a musical career and nothing else. I was managing my 2 ensembles, and everything that has happened since has actually not been, except for the choice to have my 3 children. That was a very active choice. Most other things just walked my way and plonked into my lap. In the sense of, one year I didn't have enough to do, so I applied for a job in cultural funding and got it, which was a great experience. At some point, I wanted to leave that job and applied for a job in research and happened to get it. And the music management was an active choice after, to study it rather, was an active choice on my part after having not got another job I was very interested in. So that was maybe one of the more active choices. So I think actually in some ways reacting to what's around you is a very normal procedure. And even at age 46, I don't exactly know what I want to do 100%. But I think there's a couple issues. I mean, you asked me the main skill. It depends on who you are, I guess. If you're a person who doesn't get things done, what I just said first applies. If you have the feeling that you're only just reacting all the time to what's around you, I imagine the question is not to ask so much, is this a bad thing, but to ask, which parts that you're reacting to and that you're doing do you really enjoy? And if you can figure out what you really enjoy and what makes you happy, then maybe you can actively go in that direction more. I mean, to explain what I'm saying, I'll out myself. I love doing my taxes. I love budgets. I like numbers. I know I'm weird. This is a reason
I need to hire you next year.
I really like sitting at my computer because it's a very pleasing job. It's sort of like cleaning your house. You see what you've done. It's a finite process that has an end. So there is actually a reason why I do this. I actually enjoy it. And I also do actually actively enjoy doing fundraising. I mean, if you give me a choice of calling up a concert organizer and saying, oh, you have to buy us, or writing an application for fundraising, I will write an application for fundraising. I mean, the other I also have to do. But I found that following what you like in all your chaos, there's stuff you have to do, and there's stuff that you don't have to do, but trying to follow that which is fun or makes you happy tends to sort of make it more directional. And then, of course, I do think that if you feel slightly confused by everything, it's definitely time to think about where do you want to go and have an idea. But that's more of a thing to do on paper. And I find often, I mean, I do this with projects, but also with my life as I try and imagine where do I want to be in 5 or 10 years and have a picture of what this could be and does this feel right? And visualize where would this be or how would this feel? And often I find that, oh, that part of it's wrong or that part of it's right. And it always changes on the way. I think that's life. And I guess with 19, I thought I was going to be a solo viol player traveling the world. Well, tough luck. I don't like hotels that much. So Plus, there's a couple of viol players out there who are better than me. Who cares? I'm a perfectly happy mother of 3, and I love doing the music I'm doing right now. Didn't expect to go there either. Yeah, and I said I like budgets, so I'm doing something I enjoy very much.
It sounds like you have a perfect mix. You really have a perfect mix. You can do the performance and you can organize well and you can fundraise and do all the management. So that's you're a dream team just in one person.
So what I'm hearing from in your case, obviously, is that you have this professional competency, but you have the love to be the sort of managing type. But you are also a performer, which I mean, I can't imagine how beneficial that combination is for you in general. How much can we continue? How many people who are maybe people who feel as if the management side of art production, of performance and that sort of thing, is just such a different world for them? And we meet people in our community who have hardly, I don't know if they are actually like, I don't know, I can't come up with a word which is not negative. But where someone has just no clue. No, they're not grounded. Do you know what I mean? In reality, it's not reality. You see, it's getting worse and worse the more I say. But people who are purely artistic, like who care about things, who live and die by the notation or by a certain performance practice or something, or people who care so much about the music and really have no clue about the organizational side. My question to you is, now, 1 year into a pandemic, do those people have to bite the bullet and learn something about organization?
I'm not sure if the pandemic made it any more different. I think that in a sense, if you're a die-hard musician of the sort you're speaking about who only wants to do that, basically you're a genius, and then you find somebody to do the management for you if you hate doing it. And in that case, you've got that problem solved. Or you have to do what most people have to do today, which is to have multiple jobs, being teaching, managing, whatever. And what your multiple jobs are is entirely up to you. I think a minimal management skill is essential for life. I mean, it's as basic as all of us know how to manage. I mean, we can all get our students in row and manage to turn up at the right time for the Skype call. We can all do that. Then it's also a question of, do you like doing it? And that's a personal question, but I think the minimal skills are there. It's just a question of doing it. And it doesn't seem to me, I mean, if we all assume that we can go into a library and find our music and find page 42 or folio 42 and make an edition, that's very organized. It's actually not that different to call up somebody, reserve a room, and write an email saying everybody turn up at the right time. It's also something that's just a task. I do have one, for people who have trouble visualizing what tasks there are, apart from the mind map, I think a tool I found very, very helpful, especially in the last 2 years, is online management tools that you can share with people, specifically Trello. I often find that once you've made that mind map and figured out what your tasks are, even I, with my 5 jobs and children and a pretty decent mind, can't remember everything I'm supposed to do. So I basically put my tasks into Trello and I let an email remind me when it's time to do it. Takes a load off my mind and makes sure that I think of doing things at the right time. I often find that this whole question of, oh, I can't do that or I can't management, it's also just, I mean, we all have to take out the garbage. We always have to clean our house. Doesn't mean you always like it. It seems to me to be slightly just part of the job. Unless you're enough of a genius that you can get somebody else to be paid for doing it.
I think one of the things that people struggle with specifically in this theme is the social side of it. So somebody who feels very able to go into the library and make that addition, and they might really enjoy that and be motivated to do that. They might be terrified of picking up the phone And if you are somebody who's good at both of those things, I think that's a real blessing. If you're not worried about that personal interaction, the phone call asking for money. See, to me, that feels terribly awkward. And I know you'd get used to it, but I think that would be, I'd be quite, perturbed by the thought that I had to do that part of the management. Or even just writing an email to somebody you've never met, who you have no previous contact with, you don't know how they're going to respond to you. And yeah, if you have sort of social anxiety, I suppose that can get in the way, even if you're a fantastic musician. If you have to be your own music manager, you have to sell your product and have the confidence to call up and reserve that room and say, hey, can we have some money for this cool project?
I would say here practice makes perfect, because you're speaking to me at age 46. I get asked about once, not twice a half year to speak on radio nowadays. My colleague Irene Klein will remember me at age 27. No, even younger, 23. I couldn't speak on stage. Not possible. I could not speak on stage. I spoke too fast. I spoke indistinctly. I chose the wrong words, and people would. I remember, I think one of the first criticisms I ever got was, goodness, when she plays viol, yeah, she sounds like a real professional. But when she speaks, you wouldn't think she was 23.
Oh no, that's so harsh.
This is a skill that I had to learn. Definitely something I used to be frightened of. Definitely something I didn't like doing. I quite enjoy it now. I mean, I said yes to this, didn't I?
Yeah. Well, that's really encouraging. I think that's good for everyone else to hear as well.
I'm sorry to make it sound like we're interrogating you. It sounds like we're really...
Not at all. No. No, I just feel that often it's just a question of doing. We all have teachers who tell us how to make music. I think if I have one objection to schooling today is I think, and this is a job I'd actually like, I really feel strongly we need, Luzern has this, I think Zurich now has it, we need people who teach students how to manage themselves, because I think it is actually an essential skill. And if you're talented, you figure it out by yourself. But if you're not so automatically talented, you avoid it. And I think it is an essential skill, management. And I think we should be taught that. We should be taught, how to do an interview. We should be taught how to write an application. We should be taught what's important. And coming back to your other question of people skills, I find that is actually, if anything, more and more essential, it seems to me, as I grow older and as we go more and more online. Networking. I find networking is really, really important. My management is doing the nitty-gritty and getting the jobs done. But networking is part of management, and that is calling up people, talking to people, chatting to them. So much of getting a job or getting anything is having been nice to a person 5 years ago that you didn't even know was going to have a say in it. I think that's a really important thing. I mean, so many of the things that have happened to me have had to do with something that happened on the side, or I didn't know I was doing, or had an effect 5 years on.
Good karma.
I think what I would add to exactly that is the opposite is, if you don't, as you say, that you don't know what the consequences are of your actions in terms of relationships. So also don't do something which is going to really upset someone else, because that may affect you later. And this is something, you can apply this into any category or whatever. But as you say, developing good relationships is key, but it should be a goal, and not just to think that you're in your own lane and whatever happens.
Yeah, what can I get out of this now?
Yeah.
Will sort of shoot yourself in the foot later down the line, further down the line.
Yeah.
And that's actually one of my main experiences over 25 years of working in the field. I strongly feel, get rid of the elbows.
Mm-hmm.
Really get rid of those elbows. If another viol player got that job, that's fine. If another singer got that job, that's also fine. You have nothing to win by talking badly about another musician or another person.
Mm-hmm.
You can only lose.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Yep.
I would agree with that. Yeah. Yeah. Also in life in general, don't just do it for professional reasons. Be nice. Be nice to each other.
Especially if we're all going to have to get jobs in other parts, in other sectors. If we all have to balance more than just professional performing, then you never know who it's not necessarily musicians who you have to network with, but anyone could become a resource later on.
That's an important point. I often feel that we expend a lot of our time, if we're speaking about management, talking to our musicians and being social to musicians. I've often found that this is a very important one, I think, in management. If you are dealing with a concert organizer, they are generally doing that concert because they love the music and they're actually interested in you and as a person. I think a very important point I learned early on is take the time after the concert to spend time with the organizer and spend time maybe even with the people who help set up the chairs. Contact the people who are not your fellow musicians because you know your fellow musicians, you're going to have pizza with them the other day too. But you
Hmm.
are building your network of your audience. You are building the network of people who will invite you again. And to be honest, it's not even a job. It's so much fun. I mean, they're just as interested in what you're doing as you are.
Yeah.
I used to work for a music festival in Canada. I did 3 summers as one of their production people, and there was this one group who came in my second year called Time for Three. I don't know if you know of them, but they're a 2 violins and double bass trio. I don't know if they're still around, but they were doing sort of semi-pop classical kind of crossover stuff. So they were the most pop type of group that was in this particular festival. And they made a point to take out whatever office staff were around after the concert to the bar. That was their point. It wasn't socialized with the multitude of other musicians who were at this festival and to see their buddies who were still there. It was to take them out for a beer later, and you could see that once they had left, that everybody in the office were saying, "When are they going to come back for the next one?"
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's a very important point.
Nice.
Grace, do you have another question? I have one more.
Go for it, Andrew.
Okay, so Jane, at the moment we're having a conversation which could exist at any time in my life, if you know what I mean. But what we are not kind of talking about on the level is there going to be a massive change to performing as a profession going forward? Do you think that performing as a standalone profession is going to continue?
Well, I think it always has, it existed, and it always will. There are, I mean, I don't have a glass ball here,
Sure.
but there are different countries in different situations. And I'm very much specifically in the early music field, so that's a field I really know. I can only really speak for that field and perhaps for the country I'm in and maybe for Europe. Is that all right if I answer your question in that context?
Absolutely.
In that context, Switzerland is a very difficult country if you want to live only from music, simply because the fees we earn, and especially internationally, are generally not enough to fund a house or even a family. I could basically survive without my jobs if I wanted to, but not with 3 kids, not happening. So that's not even a choice. So I think, at least in this country, at this day and age, hopefully in 30 years it'll be different, it's not a choice, generally said, if you want to have a standard life with kids or whatever. If you're willing to only do music, you can make it happen. But as I said, leave the kids and a nice house out of the picture, please. Depends on how much you're willing to give up. It's a question of your needs. Now, the question of what does the audience want, I think in some ways this pandemic has been quite helpful because we have seen a couple things. Number one, the audience needs us. Not only we need the audience, but the audience needs us, and they want performances. Now, what we've also seen is that digital performances are an option. I think they are here to stay. None of that speaks to the fact that we, with our very specialized field of early music, will be having less performance opportunities. Actually, sounds to me like we might have more and also ecologically more sound performance options. I mean, if somebody in Australia can now visit my live stream and will do that and accept that as a feasible concert option, as far as I'm concerned, our world just got better. We just have to be paid for it, but nobody's talking about not paying us in our country at the moment. So I don't actually see that part of it as problematic. I mean, I think people will always want music. If you can survive from making music as a professional musician, that is a slightly different question having to do with your needs as a person, your talent as a musician, and what you imagine your life to be like. I have the impression it's often not so much a question of do you want to be a musician, but what kind of a life do you want? I think that's the bigger question.
Yeah, that's the really depressing question, isn't it? Want to be a musician, but I'd also like a house, a garden, a kid, a cat, a dog, a chicken someday. Do I have to choose between the two? But it's interesting that you mentioned Switzerland as being difficult for those purposes, because I thought that about the UK as well when I was living there. I thought if I were purely freelance, if I were a musician in the UK, you can go to London to try and get as much work as possible. But I still didn't feel that house, kids, dog and cat were ever going to be possible staying in the UK either. And here I feel like the fees within Switzerland, so the music lessons I give are relatively well paid. Concerts is always a question, it doesn't always work out to add up your hourly rate for concert preparation. But I felt a little bit more optimistic about my financial survival in Basel than in England. But I haven't lived in England again in my adult life. I've basically spent my adult life in Switzerland. So I actually might be living in a false world as well. I don't actually have a direct comparison. Andrew, how do you feel moving over from Canada? Do you think you would be surviving as a musician there?
Doing what I am doing, which is historical bassoon playing, I would make in Canada the equivalent of about 1,000 francs or 1,000 to 3,000 francs a year. Right?
Goodness.
Amazing.
So not possible to conceive having strictly a profession in the niche area, whereas Basel is like the center of the world for historical bassoon playing, right? And what is different here in terms of the artistic culture is that if one were to put on a performance, regardless of the sort of situation, whether it's a church a service or whether it's a local, I don't know, community gathering or whatever, if they were to have music which was from a certain time period, locals are experienced enough in the culture to probably ask somebody who has the expertise. Whereas in North America, or not North America, in my Canadian experience, that's just not the case. There's a complete ignorance over historical performance, so to speak. So that sort of work would go to somebody else. Yeah.
So you're better off here.
Because I've chosen to do this specific thing. Of course, I could do something else, but then artistically, there wouldn't be so much of a point. I'm not somebody who's saying I need to perform anything. That's not my goal. My goal is to perform this repertoire. Doing this.
So we've sort of doomed ourselves. We want the niche performance, but even in the center for that style of performance, we're still not going to be having 3 kids in a little cute garden.
Yeah. Well, what I find interesting that Jane's talking about here is that most of the people who I have been working with, like generally I'm usually the youngest person in the ensemble that whatever ensemble I'm playing with, and most people are somewhere in their late 30s, early 40s, and what I notice about them either they are somebody who is super high in demand and they're playing in major groups who fill them up, with their calendar is full performing. Some of them have a spouse who has a job which is, not non-musical in Switzerland. And others simply have the sort of income stream, which is they have a full-time teaching job in a Swiss conservatory music school. And then they pick the artistic projects that they are most satisfied by. They know that the people they want to play with are playing. They know that that's the repertoire that they want to play. And so therefore, the conversation that I've been having in this area with some friends of mine is that performing, strictly looking at performance, it is sort of a hobby. We are remunerated for the performances that we do, but the people who end up playing in the area that I'm playing in are all doing this because they want to, but not because they have a financial necessity. There's no need for them to earn the income. It's actually because they want to do it strictly. And so I hate to use the term hobby in this case, but just the mindset around it is that in those particular projects that I've been playing in, those people, if they said it was for free, they still would play if the same people were there and it was the same repertoire. Yeah.
And this problem actually gets larger as you get older, I'll say quite honestly, because I spent quite a few years, my husband also earns enough money. I think for the past 15 years, it would have been much more sensible for me to stay home and spend time with my kids because I pay more for the daycare of my kids in this country than I earn by making music for the same time. Mm-hmm. So that has been always a very active choice because I say, okay. But of course, it then makes the pressure, if the gig's not interesting, I don't take it. Yeah. Because it means not being home and it means basically paying. It's changing again now that they get older. That, by the way, is one of the big differences between Switzerland and the countries around. Both Germany, France, I don't know how it is in Italy, have, if you want to have children, an affordable childcare system, which if you're, so to speak, a low-earning musician, is still okay. I mean, I know this is a direct comparison I always had with Irene. She could have daycare, flexible daycare for her children at prices always that were such that she could always decide to take a job. And for me, I have a lower limit. I just do not go out of the door before 300 or 400 francs a day just because it's just not worth it. Mm. And that can be very frustrating. I don't know. I mean, I guess for me, the question ends up being the other way around. Coming back to the beginning of the conversation, what makes you happy? I don't want to stop being a musician, never have. I love making music. But I also spend time finding other things that make me happy. And also in my case, if I make the choice for children, that let me be home. That's a big one because traveling all the time with 3 small kids just isn't an option. Not what I wanted, and I don't think what my husband wanted either. But
wisdom. Yes, that does gets me thinking, certainly, because I'm still at a stage where I'm sort of rolling along, and I take concerts that come my way and I enjoy them, but like Andrew said earlier, I haven't really sort of made my mind map of the years ahead. The only thing on my long-term 5-year plan is I must have a cat at some point soon. That is the important one. If I can manage that, then that's happy. But I think I get the feeling I might need to plan a little further than that.
Not really. Actually, that's a pretty straight answer. You need a house that lets you have a cat. So where's that house?
Exactly.
Where is that house?
Some animals of some kind. Yes, exactly.
Until then, you just have Skype filters and Zoom filters.
Yes. Until then, I have the birds on my balcony. That's something that wouldn't be compatible with the cat. So,
I was just about to
silver
say,
lining.
It'd be like, oh, look what the cat brought in today.
Oh, no. No.
This is one thing, I have a similar wish, is that I wished to have an animal around the house, but I also feel extremely wary of the fact that we're on the 5th floor of a building in which there's just no access to the ground, you know.
Yeah.
And that's sorry, that's off topic, but it's one of those things that,
It's the topic of life.
How did we end up? It's sounding like we're making a real rigmarole for let's not be musicians. No, actually, I'm not. I'm not at all making that rigmarole. But I do think that you should think about that cat and what makes you happy. I really do think that. And then find a balance of things that makes it possible. I think probably if I say, dream about where you want to be, I'm not saying only dream about what you want to do musically. Definitely dream about what you want to do musically. I've had very good experience with that. Generally, if I have an idea, it happens. It's great fun. I mean, Grace has been part of that last year, is me sort of having an idea of I'd like to do something, and then it gets done. It does get done. But also spend some time dreaming about what you'd like your life to look like. And then see how much of all the things you want, both professionally, musically, and personally, you can get together. It's another form of management.
I find it interesting.
I'm going to take that on board.
I'm just remembering the fact that what this sort of the idea, the goal setting and the overall, when I was 20 years old, I knew that I wanted to come to Schola, and I knew that by 25 I wanted to be finished my degrees and performing in Basel, and I did every I did the sort of lay out the little steps and got into an orchestra that I wanted to get into and so on, but then when I hit 25, I was like, okay, I did it. And I'm 31 now. It's interesting how if you're not if it's an organic process, isn't it? That once one thing is complete, then the next you there has to be something else that you have to move on to. Would you agree with that?
Yes, and I also think it does go in cycles. I mean, also part of the management concept is that you think, first of all, they have this thing, this is Herzhand. It's basically to think with your heart, your head, and your hands. That you need all aspects. And there is something, again, speaking as an older person, I find that life does go in cycles. At about 20, you want to, achieve something in the world, and you want to do really big things, and you want to go and prove you can be the fastest viol player or have the best ensemble or win prizes. Did that, done that, been there. Then there's the 30s, in my experience, and I said I'm not very old yet, but I have had a couple of years. In the 30s, you're sort of busy producing things, making things happening, sort of building your house, so to speak. In my case, also having children. And now I'm sort of into my 40s and heading towards my 50s. I'm getting to the point where I'd like to pass something on. I'd like to stop being the person who always does everything and maybe be the person who makes it possible for other people to do things. Or hand on some wisdom. I don't know, it sounds a bit stupid, and I have the feeling these processes, it's pretty normal. I think it's normal that you go through these life cycles.
Well, you're passing on your wisdom to us now.
Yes, very inspiring. Thank you, Jane.
Jane, I think you have answered everything that I had for you today. Thank you very much for speaking with us.
Yes, thank you. Is there anything you wanted to share with us, Jane?
No, it's a pleasure being a part of this podcast. I must say, it actually makes me quite happy. I'm a regular listener, and it's a very nice sort of bi-weekly listening experience.
Nice. Well, we're happy to hear that.
Yeah, it's great to know that there are real people listening and that it's not just numbers on my spreadsheet somewhere. Great. Well, I will take us out then, if you don't mind. Grace, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. Thanks all.
So if anybody has any questions or comments, you can always send me an email at survivingclassicalmusic@gmail.com. Links are all in the description of this episode. Don't forget to check out our website, survivingclassicalmusic.com, and the Phosphenes project is ticking away every other week on the website. You can just check that out. So I hope you have a nice week, and take it easy. Thanks for watching. Bye for now. Okay, there we go. Yay!
Thank